So, hello and welcome everybody out there who's watching us live or watching us later. I'm here today with Sebastian Duerr. Hello, Sebastian.
Hey,
My
Chris.
name is Chris Armbruster. I'm the director of data career at the Guild.ai. And Sebastian is the co-founder of Persuade. Before we actually get to where you are today, Sebastian, perhaps for our audience, data career, working in the AI field, how did you get started?
Thank you so much, Chris, for being here today. I really appreciate that. Your question is how I got data. So I did information systems, which in university in Bamberg, Bavaria. And this is IT and management, more or less. And I did a classical career where I became a business consultant and then was a manager in a bank. But I didn't like the fact that we made a lot of decisions based on gut feeling. And so I was curious about how all the data stuff works. And I really learned a lot of different things with outfits such as Data Camp, where you can make certificates on becoming a research engineer and so on. And then due to the very great situation that I actually was in Vienna, Austria, I could join a program where you can educate yourself for an entire year in order to become proficient in another field. And due to the former collaborations with the University of Bamberg, I got into the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and took an entire year to research on machine learning applications, first on plants and how they respond to certain stimuli, and then at a later point about persuasion in written form. And I absolutely loved this topic, and I found two companions that said that they really want to work with me on a product or on a company. And then we formed. And in May 2021, when I actually had to go back to Vienna to my former employee, I had to tell him that we're starting this venture together, and they fully supported me and said, try your luck. And that's where we are now. Recently, like 2 months ago, our program started with the German government, where we got a very prestigious scholarship to work full-time on our dream of making communication between people with machine learning, with a lot of data in the form of natural language processing accessible to everyone.
Thank you, Sebastian. So I do actually really want to know more about this communication tool that you're building. However, the dream that you're living, so to speak, by changing your career, upskilling to machine learning, and even becoming a co-founder of a company, is, I think, something that many people in the audience share or perhaps even aspire to. So I want to go back a little bit and ask you, so you were working in a bank. Okay, a bank also typically has numbers. Numbers are in some form data. So you had a numerate background, but nevertheless, you mentioned learning something in Vienna. You mentioned doing something at the MIT. How long did it take you all together, and how much effort did you put into this?
So, and I think I shouldn't say this on camera, but here I am. I did five years, and I even started a PhD that I never finished on information systems, IT and management. But back in the days, I never coded. We had Java, and I understood that you need to start with string void main args in the first line, but I never really got into that. And I, then just went down the management track where you control and manage teams that develop products. But every day in the bank, I could see, hey, these guys that create the product, they're putting something into practice. They actually created the banking products that we were trying to sell in another department in the bank. And it struck me when my flatmate at the time gave me a learning platform called Team Treehouse, which allows you to learn Python. And he had a little use case, a project that we did in our flat together, where we built sensors to measure air quality. And he was like, hey, can you do the Python part of it? Because you studied IT in business, right? Yeah, sure, I can do that. Knowing that I think I could, but eventually I struggled a lot. And then he was like, hey, try Team Treehouse. They do Python. That should be working. And then I did that and I got so hooked. And every day, you would be in the bank and you would see people fighting over whether the button should be green or yellow, and like having lengthy discussions about that. And you'd be like, this is so much energy we're spending here on things that are potentially meaningful. And I always understood where the people were coming from. But if we would just like say we do yellow now and then we move on, we'd be much quicker. And so in the evening, I would come home frustrated and finish like, yeah, first team treehouse and then data camp. And then I felt like, okay, this is so cool. I love it. I fully love it. Like the time from this was January 2019 towards September 2019, when I approached my boss that I want to take this gap year that Austria gives to every of the citizens in order to take a full year at MIT and really, really go deep into the path of machine learning and yeah, natural language processing, deep learning at a later stage. And yeah, they supported me. They were saying, "Hey, we're really gonna miss you, but at the same time, I don't know, when you return, this will be great, great benefits and like skills that we need at our company anyways, even to understand these technologies." Yeah, and then in May 2020, when COVID hit, I couldn't fly like precisely to Boston, but I could start this whole thing and do it for an entire year, and it was amazing. But yeah, it of course took some time and dedication, but actually it was really fun.
Thank you, Sebastian. So, sticking with that for a moment and then connecting it to what you're doing today. I find your story excellent. It reminds me of an observation Jean-François Garnier, a French-Canadian entrepreneur in the AI space, had years ago, that the most important attribute actually is the willingness to learn and to keep going and the persistence. And you mentioned that it took you 4 to 5 years to kind of become an expert in what you do. And this is a typical story. It's also sort of in terms of benchmark precisely what happens. The field is young, so it's really up to the practitioners to make this work. And also, of course, great that you had this opportunity for 1 year to actually focus on doing this. This is much more than people who sometimes have 3 months to complete a course or something. So you really kept going at it. You mentioned, or I mentioned at the beginning, that you're the co-founder of Persuade, and you introduced it as a communication tool. So I've put up the keyword NLP here, and would like to invite you to speak to that. So, at some point you must have gotten interested in what you're doing now. So what is it exactly that you do now, and how is your expertise? What kind of expertise from your side goes into this?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question, Chris. Um, it's so fun. So starting a company is also the that I ever do this before. Like I worked for this bank with 20,000 employees, so that's been difficult, but also exciting. And we're actually pivoting again. So I kind of try to walk you a little bit through the journey that we did in the last year. So at MIT, I published with Professor Peter Claude 2 papers on natural language processing and persuasion. And natural language processing kind of like entails all the technologies and techniques that you can use in order to manipulate a text. So an easy application field is summarizing it, or parroting a sentence to make it sound different. Or it could also be that you want to change the time. Sorry, not the time, the tense of like all the verbs in a sentence, or create like some consistency there. These are like all the use cases, and we identified some 60 manipulations that you can do to a text to get them towards being more persuasive through consistency, through simplifying them, etc. And while I was also this machine learning engineer and student that did all these courses, I learned how to implement them in code. And our first project, Persuade, is a platform that, where you can plug in any text that you have, and we look for these cues, and where we really try to give you guidance on what you should rephrase, what you should make a little bit more polite, what you should say in another way in order to be more persuasive and to get your message across in a better way. And natural language processing, as like different manipulations that we implemented as microservices helps us with that. My role always was implementing these microservices, and give them then to our backend, where our full stack developer gives them to the end user. And that is kind of the role I have in this. The learning we had after a few months of setting up this platform is that when you start a company, you obviously need to find a business problem that you solve. And while everybody wants to become more persuasive, and everybody raises their hand and says, yeah, I want to become more persuasive, help me. If I can plug in my sentence there, and then people immediately are more persuaded, that's absolutely amazing. And all these ways and things help me, that's great. But try find someone that pays for that, because obviously they need to use it in a daily business. And people we figured are really, really well aware of how to write a persuasive text, and how to use the arguments in order to be persuasive. And so we changed a little bit from that. And now what we do is we help people that, in the use case scenario of LinkedIn right now, do outreach. Meaning if you want to contact any practitioner, let's say, that, and want to ask him if he wants to qualify for Data Lift to be a speaker at this awesome conference that is going to take place in June, then we help you to craft a text based on the profile, based on the analysis, together with our NLP features that we created and used in the previous version in order to communicate in an efficient way, and speak very personally with this person and also with others in order to get your people together.
So speak efficiently, speak persuasively. I mean, it's something most of us do. I mean, it's kind of like an everyday task for everybody that's working, right? You have colleagues, there's a workplace environment, maybe you're interacting with customers and so on. At the moment, you mentioned it's working on LinkedIn, so I guess it's working in the written format. How do how do you see the difference that NLP actually makes to what you're doing?
So the big benefit of NLP is, or of what NLP has become, because they call it the Imagenet moment that only happened in 2017, when natural language processing finally got so good that in the Turing test, it wasn't even possible anymore. If you have a written text, it's really hard to identify whether it's written by a human being or by a computer. And this only happened with the change to an architecture named transformers. And these transformers allow to really make a difference and create text that sound authentic, and that also can be altered in certain ways to have these cues of persuasion integrated. And this is where NLP comes to play. You have a text, you can create that based on a LinkedIn profile, for instance, but you can also write one. And then you can use NLP to absolutely make sure, to kind of cut off the edges, that it sounds persuasive, that it sounds written by a human, but that it also, it takes your points into consideration and controls for certain aspects. One, for instance, that I think is very tangible as an example is, we as humans tend to say often, I would like you to do that. And a way of changing that can be that you speak actually with you and from the perspective of the person you're writing to, because that obviously makes that person feel much more appreciated if you try to take their lens. And with NLP technologies and ways of implementing this concept, you can actually give this to humans that are not able of implementing it themselves, but that say I more often than they maybe should.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So actually, you're helping me switch perspectives if I use it. In terms of communication, I guess that's very true. Yeah. So you can send all the messages that you want. The question is how the audience, how the listener or the reader actually listens, hears or reads what you're trying to communicate, and whether they're able to make sense of it. And in this sense, I don't know. swapping shoes, so to speak, with your listener or reader, or being in their shoes, or swapping perspectives makes an awful lot of sense. So you also mentioned that NLP, has had its moment like 5 years ago, and it's becoming easier to implement this. So you're in the midst of setting up a company, of developing products, also pivoting your products a little bit. Do you have any idea where this is going to go in the next 2-3 years?
Not really. I guess everything I would say now would be like reading the future, and obviously this is impossible. No, we work really hard every day with clients, trying to understand where we should go or make a left or a right turn, how we should change our feature set, our current product offer, and we just recently like achieved product market fit. And now it's really about scaling this, and also like make sure that the product market fit is like being maintained over the next phases now, because there's also different users. You have like the early adapters / innovators, and then you have the early majority and the late majority, and they all have their different needs that you need to fulfill. And yeah, I think the next 2-3 years are really like going through this innovation curve, making sure that we get a lot of people on board and help them actually communicate in a good way to the people they want to talk to.
Okay, thank you for that. So actually, you're going to come to the Data Lift Summit, which is in June in Berlin, and you're going to give a workshop, an introduction to something called Creating Temporal Cohesion with Spacey, which I can easily identify as being in the NLP realm, and maybe our audience can also identify as being in the NLP realm. Some people may actually know what Spacey is, and then maybe somebody has an idea about creating temporal cohesion. But let's start with Spacey. So what is Spacey? And you're doing this workshop. Does it also play a role in your product?
So Spacey is really the industry standard and go-to Python package. I think it's also available in other coding languages, but it's like really one of the go-to Python packages that allow you to use NLP. It's absolutely amazing. It's from a Berlinian startup called Explosion AI. And yeah, it helps to quickly set up an NLP pipeline with which you can do certain aspects. And we're gonna use this tool for the use case of creating consistent tenses in let's say an essay. And the way we use Spacey for that will be that we go through every sentence and take like a look at it from a linguistic perspective, meaning what is the verb in that phrase? What is the auxiliary verb? How many objects, how many subjects do we have in a sentence? And then how do we need to alter these aspects that we can identify due to the statistical model that is used or implemented into Spacey, in order to then see, okay, the sentence right now, Tom and Jerry are going to the school, is in present tense. And then we will be able to say, okay, how does it sound in the future? How does it sound in the past? And why do we talk about Tom and Jerry here in the present, here in the future, and here in the past, and here in the past? And we're gonna learn how to make sure that this is consistent. And through this, we actually fulfill one more criteria of persuasion. We create temporal cohesion. So we don't switch like the tenses too much, by making sure they're consistent throughout. And this way we can achieve like a sense of cohesion, which is also easier to understand. And then as a factor of that, more understandable / persuasive.
Interesting. So I now also actually have, thank you for that, have an idea what temporal cohesion means. So it means that if I'm speaking or writing, that you want a certain kind of consistency, and the consistency actually relates to the tenses in which the verbs are communicated, right?
Exactly.
Can you explain, why this is important? What's the meaning of this?
So the meaning of this is really like getting to understand how you can use natural language processing, in this case with Spacey, which is very robust. So it works very, very, very well. It's the industry standard, and many other companies use it. And the benefit of it is, as I said, like you make sure that you are talking in a persuasive way or writing, sorry, in a persuasive way. Other use cases scenarios where this can be used, and this is at a former company where I interned. They needed this for writing medical reports. So when you are in a medical trial, you have to write such a report in present tense. And then when the trial has happened, they have to take the report and turn it into the past. And so the CEO of the company approached me and asked me if there's a fast way to change all the tenses from present into past, because they have to do it all the time, and big pharmaceutical companies have to recurrently go back to that and like do that, and it just takes them a lot of time to do it manually. But like if it would be done for them and they just have to read through it, then they'd gain quite some time. And I was like, sure. And I created the solution based off the idea that I've read in a paper from Stanford University. Yeah. Okay. So this is like where it's coming from, how it can be used. I hope this answered your question, Chris.
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. It also actually already gives people, I think, a glimpse of what to expect if they were to join you. So if you want to work with Sebastian and learn more on the 24th of June in Berlin, you can do so live for a 3-hour hands-on workshop. Do you already have a good idea what that is going to look like? So what can participants expect?
Yeah, so we're gonna first have like an introduction to natural language processing very briefly. After that, the next objective will be to be introduced to Spacey and how you can use that. Then we will have a little excursion on the linguistic aspects that I mentioned earlier, how you can identify certain word types and certain entities within text. And then we're gonna code together and go through a Jupyter notebook and certain functions that help us to identify and change the word types, like auxiliary verbs, also signal words, like yesterday, that would maybe need to be changed to tomorrow if we're now talking in the future, in order to create this temporal cohesion that I talked about. And yeah, this will be guided by me, but I hope people bring the laptop or have a chance to follow along, and we're gonna yeah, roll it out or like implement it together, and then they go home with a tool that allows them in a brief or like small web app in Flask that allows them to put in any text, decide which tense it should be in, and then to change the tense to the target tense of the text, future, present, or past.
Thank you. Sounds really cool. So, I mean, they actually, you go home not just with a take-home message, but you go home with a take-home app that will actually perform the function that you were building. So this means you're looking for the workshop, you're looking for practitioners that know what a Jupyter notebook is, have used it before, and can kind of, for the 3 hours, code along with you. And each of them go home with a practical demonstration, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, we will make all the code available publicly. So if people do not have a chance to code along, because I don't know, they don't have their laptops with them or whatsoever reason for that, then obviously they will be able to follow along on the screen, because we're gonna like talk step by step through the solution, and then yeah, coming from there, yeah, they're gonna get the code and can run it themselves.
I have a follow-on question for you, Sebastian. So does it make sense to bring your own text, and does it need to be in English? Will any language do?
So that's really cool. Spacey works in, I actually don't know how many it is, but I think like 50. It's pretty easy to figure out. I just don't want to go to Google right now. How many languages Spacey supports, but the major ones, let's say, so French, German, Portuguese, or Spanish should absolutely be supported. So they can also bring other texts.
Okay, there might be actually some fun in that if people try to do this, create temporal cohesion in different languages. One could also have a chat, I guess, about the differences afterwards. After all, we know from our time at school and learning foreign languages that the grammar can vary widely. So I get that. Okay, so to wrap it up.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, from that perspective, we're going to implement it with English language. And we're gonna pinpoint where the adaptations need to be made Because you're right, the word order sometimes changes in different languages. So we're going to mind that. Yeah.
Okay, Sebastian, thank you very much for this introduction. Again, so if anybody wants to join, Data Lift Summit is run from 22nd to the 24th of June in Berlin this summer. Sebastian will be there. On the Friday, he will give this 3-hour workshop that you're welcome then to join, and actually go home with a practical demonstration, learn the power of Spacey, and learn the power of the idea of having temporal cohesion in what you say and write to be more persuasive and efficient in the way you communicate. Sebastian, thank you very much for being here. A final comment from your side?
You said it earlier, always continue to learn. There's so much out there in the data space. It's absolutely amazing. I absolutely love this journey, and I'm so happy to meet a lot of people that are interested at this conference. I'm really looking forward to the Data Lift Summit in Berlin.
Thank you very much.